In the business world, you've probably heard the term ERP. Whenever I tell people my job is to teach ERP systems, I always get asked the same question: what is that? Hi, my name is Chris, and in this video, I'm going to be giving a simple but detailed answer to the question, what is an ERP? And also, what should you know about it? So let's start off with a one-sentence definition of an ERP system. It is simply one piece of software that handles most, if not all, the critical components of your business. So let's lay this out with a real life example. Let's say I'm creating a new business. I'm making a lemonade stand. So I set up a table in front of my house. I go to the store, I buy some lemonade mix, and I start selling it to customers on the street. Now, in the beginning, I probably don't need any software, but as I start to sell more and more lemonade, eventually I'm going to get to the point where I need to keep track of the accounting. I need to make sure I know what am I actually spending on the lemonade mix, how much am I making from the customers. As more time goes on, I grow further and I get to the point where I'm making more sales, and I'm even getting local businesses to buy my lemonade in bulk so they can sell it in their own locations like diners, etc. So now I want to have a customer relationship management system to keep track of those relationships with my larger customers. Moving on from there, we then get to the point where I decide, listen, I'm selling so much lemonade, why am I just buying it from the grocery store? I should go to the original manufacturer of the lemonade mix and buy it in bulk. So now I need to keep track of the procurement lines and my relationships with various vendors. And then of course, as I'm expanding, I'm eventually going to get to the point where I probably need to get an actual physical location like a storefront or maybe a kiosk and hire employees, which in this particular example, I'm probably hiring 12-year-olds to help me sell my lemonade. But I'm going to need to pay these guys. I'm going to need to maybe give them time off, benefits, payroll, all those different human capital management functions. I'll have to keep track of that. So all of these different elements of my business, as I'm going, I may get one piece of software for one thing, like on the accounting, I might just be using Excel or QuickBooks. Then I add the sales and CRM, and I could use HubSpot or eventually maybe even Salesforce for that. Something else for inventory management, maybe the human capital management, I'm using Workday for that. So I've got all these different pieces of software that are handling different elements of the business. Instead of trying to cobble together these random pieces of software, an ERP system can be one software that keeps all the data in one place. You'll often hear the term single source of truth because it's got one source of data that all of these different functions and modules are tapping into. And that's the benefit of an ERP system. So that's the concept of what an ERP does. The next thing you should understand, and something I find is a common misconception, is that people will state what they think is an ERP, and they're really mixing up the difference between ERP developers and ERP products. The best analogy I can give for this is cars. Most people are at least familiar with the basic concept of you've got car companies like Toyota, Honda, BMW, Ford, etc. Those are car makers, and then they have individual models underneath them, and they usually have multiple. So you've got Toyota Camrys or Honda CR-Vs, BMW 3 Series. You get the idea. Car maker, car product. And the same generally applies for ERP products as well. You've got the developers. So oftentimes I hear people say, our ERP system is SAP. Well, that's not completely accurate because SAP is a developer. They make many ERP products. So usually they're referring to something like maybe S/4HANA. That's a particular product from SAP. You've also got Oracle. They make a product called NetSuite, amongst other ERP products. I think you get the idea. Now, in some cases, you will have one company with one product. So for example, Acumatica, they only have one ERP called Acumatica. Same thing with Odoo. So it's not always that there's one company, multiple ERPs, but just be aware of when you're saying what you're talking about. Are you talking about a specific ERP or are you talking about the company more generally? The next thing you should understand about ERP systems, if you're going to get into the subject, is the fact that not every ERP equals every other one. There are some that are meant for large companies. There are some that are meant for small companies. So there's really a tier system in terms of the categories of ERP systems. And I want to give you a couple disclaimers up front. Consultants tend to look at it one way. I'm going to give you a tier system that I think is a bit more helpful to understand if you're going to progress up the levels, what you're going to run into, and one that I often find is what clients are thinking with and how they're approaching the progression of ERP systems. So let's start off first off with the bottom tier, which is called tier 3. And that is, again, in my opinion, what I would call accounting software. So these are products like QuickBooks, Xero, Zoho Books, Sage 50. Now, a lot of consultants would disagree with me on this one, and they would argue that these products are not strictly speaking ERPs. Because again, this tier, I'm qualifying this as something where they are predominantly accounting software. But the lines are honestly a bit blurred, because if you look at something like Zoho, Zoho can do not just accounting, it can do a number of different things. If you're looking even at QuickBooks, QuickBooks is not just accounting or bookkeeping software, it also has a CRM element to it, and it can do a little bit of inventory management. So what really brings this tier together is the fact that it is primarily accounting. That's what it's trying to accomplish. But almost all of these products come with other bells and whistles. They try to kind of push into other elements of your business to make it more desirable for companies to take advantage of. So what unifies them is the fact that at their core, they are accounting software, and the fact that they are much, much cheaper than any of the other tiers. So that's what we're taking as our tier 3. That's the first option that any business that's starting off, usually making less than $5 million in revenue per year, is going to be going on to something like that. Now, graduating up from tier 3, you get to tier 2, which is called the SMB tier. SMB stands for small to mid-sized businesses. Now, some consultants like to split that into 2 tiers and say there's small businesses and then there's mid-tier, but I don't find that's a very helpful way to approach it, because the same ERP products that you're going to find in the small business tier are the same ones you're going to find in the mid-tier. They're meant to grow with the company. So you're going to find products like Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, Odoo, Acumatica, Epicor, and many, many others. This is definitely the biggest tier in terms of the quantity of ERPs. And this is the first true ERP tier where there's no question these products are all ERP systems that can handle many, many different aspects of your business. And again, they may come in even at the pre-revenue stage. In other words, you're not making any money yet, but they can take you from that point all the way up to the point where you may be making anywhere from $200 to $500 million in revenue per year. A lot of NetSuite companies, for example, are over $1 billion in revenue and are doing perfectly fine on NetSuite. So there's a lot of range and a lot of flexibility within that tier. And then finally, graduating up from the second tier, you get to the first tier, which people unanimously agree that tier 1 is the enterprise tier. And when you get to that tier, there's really just a handful of options. You've got 3 companies that make enterprise grade ERP software, and that is Oracle, Microsoft, and SAP. And if you're asking yourself, why are there so few at the top? It's the same reason there's not that many companies making rocket ships. It's an expensive endeavor. You have to have billions of dollars and the infrastructure, the servers, etc., to be able to make a product that can handle something like Coca-Cola or Tesla, some of these massive corporations. So just a handful of options at that level. And one thing that unifies them is the fact that these are companies that are making billions of dollars in revenue per year. They have massive corporate structures, so they're multi-subsidiary, they're international, they're dealing with many different currencies, that kind of thing. So those are the tiers. You have kind of accounting software at the bottom that's kind of bleeding into the ERP world. Then you have the true ERP of small to mid-size, and then enterprise, the massive publicly traded companies at the top, and the ERPs that are meant for them. Now, the next thing you should be aware of when you're talking about ERPs is how they get deployed. And there's really 3 ways it can be done. Historically, the most common way was called on-premise, meaning the system itself is literally in a room. You have the servers on the premise of your business. And there are some benefits to that. First off, they tend to be much faster than the alternatives, because when you have fiber optic cables like literally in your location, it just runs the system much quicker, as opposed to trying to get things from the internet, especially large data dumps or imports. That can take quite a while if you're accessing the cloud. So on-premise has that benefit. It also has a security benefit because it's in your building, you know what the security protocols are, and you can make sure that they are kept in. So oftentimes for companies that have defense contracts, things like that, it's often mandatory that to be able to work with these companies at all, they have to have the software and the information on premise. So that is the historical route, but more and more companies are moving towards the second deployment method, which is in the cloud. And the concept of that is relatively simple. You have all of the software, the infrastructure, and all of your data is living in the cloud, which literally just means it's in a data center somewhere, probably in Greenland or Arizona or something. So that is the cloud approach. And when you're looking at cloud, again, all the ERP developers are moving in that direction, but it's not necessarily because it's the best option. There are benefits of cloud, but there are drawbacks as well. The reason everyone is going towards it is because it's financially in their best interest. The monetary incentives of selling software as a service where they can bill you every single year, as opposed to just selling you a product one time, is way, way, way more lucrative for them. So because of money interests, they go in that direction, not necessarily because on-premise is a bad option. And then of course, the third deployment method is just a mix of the two, which is the hybrid approach. So you've got some elements that are on-premise, some elements that are in the cloud. And this is usually done for larger companies. You maybe have certain subsidiaries have on-premise ERP system, and then other subsidiaries within the overall corporate structure are dealing strictly in the cloud. So that is a third option that, again, larger companies take advantage of. Generally, smaller companies are just going to be either on-premise or in the cloud. Now, the last two things I want to comment on in this video both address who I'm anticipating is watching this video and the two groups that it would fall into. So first off, there's the people that are watching this because they think there's some career opportunity within ERP systems. And the second group are generally business owners that are looking to move on to an ERP or up to a higher tier of ERP system. And at the end of this video, I'll talk a little bit more about that element of it. So if you are in that camp, just stick around to the end of this video. But if you're getting into ERP systems and watching this video because you're wondering how can you take advantage of this from a career opportunity standpoint, the first thing you should understand is there's really two major categories of roles that interact with ERP systems. There are user roles and there are professional roles. So user roles they can be many different things, but it's somebody that has a job that is going to be doing their job in the ERP system. So let's say you can be an accountant or a purchaser or an inventory manager, like a warehouse manager. You may be a sales representative. All of these roles and many, many more will have some interaction with the system at the company that they're working for. So if their company makes widgets and you are a purchaser for that widget making company, well, you're gonna have to touch, let's say it's Microsoft Business Central. You're gonna have to do your job in that system. So there's a benefit to understanding how that system works. So when it comes to user roles, first off, obviously you need to understand the role that you're in. If you're a sales rep, you need to be good at sales, but then you need to understand something about the system, but not a great depth. That does depend on the role a little bit, but generally when you're looking at user roles, you usually just need anywhere from 1 to maybe 6 weeks of training on the software to be able to understand it well enough to do your job. And oftentimes the courses that I teach are specifically for user roles. They're to get people familiar enough with the system so they can do their job. And the benefit of doing that and getting familiarity with something like Odoo or NetSuite or Acumatica is that you can then put it on your resume. You can make yourself more eligible to companies who need to hire an accountant, and instead of onboarding you on how their ERP works, if you already know it, that's going to make you more desirable for that company. So there's a big appeal for that element of things. And then the second option is professional roles. And there's a few different options within that. You've got things like administrators, also known as IT managers. These are the people that are going to be maintaining the system for the company they work for. And then you also have consultants. So there's many different types of consultants, but you generally have functional consultants who are the ones that are going to be implementing the system. They're going to make sure that it's up and running, or potentially even making it more efficient or effective even after it's been implemented. And then you have developers, which are still technically consultants, but they're going to be going in and making custom code and customizations for the ERP system to work and match what that particular client company is trying to accomplish. And the professional roles are desirable for obvious reasons. They tend to be remote, so you can work from home, you can often have flexible hours, and the pay tends to be really good. You can make anywhere from 6 figures, like $100,000, and then many developers and consultants can make over $200,000 if they're really experts in their particular area. So you've got a pretty considerable range of salary and some nice perks. It's also not grueling work. You talk to clients quite a bit, you work with the system. It does have an appeal for a lot of people. So people have interest if they're doing some other job and they want to shift into being some kind of professional ERP expert, or maybe they're entering the workforce and they see that as being a career path. There are some real benefits of that. Now, when it comes to that element of things, I will be coming out with more videos like this one where I dive into career potentials really specifically, but I'd like to know from you guys down in the comments exactly what you want to know about career opportunities. So is it which ERP is best to try to make a career in, which ones tend to pay more, what roles tend to pay better, the paths to get into these roles. There's a lot of things I can talk about, and I probably will over time, but if there's ones you want me to prioritize, definitely let me know. So that handles the kind of why are you watching this video from a career opportunity standpoint. The last thing we'll comment on is if you are looking at getting an ERP system. Now, there are many different ERPs. There's, depending on what you qualify as an ERP, there's anywhere from 50 to 80 different systems that can be taken advantage of. So if you're wondering which ones should you look at, which should you take advantage of, first off, I have many videos on this subject. So you can start looking through my YouTube channel and see if there's any that particularly interest you. And if you want to get more custom advice on what your business is trying to accomplish and which system is probably best for you, you can also reach out to me. I'll have a link down below for my website. I have contact forms on there. You simply set a time and I can meet with you for a brief time to try to give you some advice and point you in the right direction. So with all that in mind, hopefully this video allowed you to get a basic understanding of ERP systems, what they are, and what you should know about them. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And with all that in mind, I'll see you in the next video.